I need to talk about what happened with my neighbor, Ethan Clark. We lived in the same apartment building for almost 3 years. At first, he was just the quiet guy down the hall, the type you nod at in passing but never really talked to. He wore big round glasses, always had a backpack that looked like it weighed more than he did, and carried a paperback in his hand like it was an extension of his body. He was a bookworm, for sure. Introverted. Socially awkward. He had this stiff way of walking, like he was always holding something back, like his whole body was clenched. But he was polite. Always said, "Good morning," in this soft, almost whispery voice. Nothing ever seemed off, until it did that I live in a small, slightly run-down apartment complex in Tacoma, Washington. It's the kind of place where the walls are too thin, the hallway lights flicker like a bad horror movie, and the heating system either tries to roast you alive or freezes you solid, no in-between. My unit is 3B, and Ethan was in 3C, right next to mine. We shared a wall. You could hear when the other person dropped a book or bumped into furniture. Usually, it was quiet from his side. He read a lot, played classical music softly, lots of Bach and Debussy, and that was it. But around mid-January this year, something shifted. At first, it was subtle. I'd hear Ethan pacing back and forth for hours at night. Like, literal hours. Step step step, pause, step step step, then a sudden thud, like he kicked something or smacked the wall. It happened a few nights in a row. I brushed it off. Maybe he had insomnia. Maybe he was dealing with stress. Who wasn't? Then came the humming. Not music, just humming. Low, guttural, tuneless humming, almost like a chant. Sometimes it sounded like he was repeating words, but they were too muffled to make out. That's when I started to feel that gnawing unease. Like my body picked up on something my brain hadn't caught yet. The first drawing. I found it on my doormat early one morning. It was a piece of paper, folded in half like a greeting card. No envelope. I thought maybe it was an ad or a flyer, until I picked it up. It was a drawing, done in black pen. Sloppy but intense, like whoever drew it pressed the pen into the paper so hard it almost tore. It showed a distorted face with bulging eyes and a gaping mouth, like it was screaming. But the thing that freaked me out the most was that it didn't have a body, it was just floating in what looked like a wall of shadows, with thin scribbled hands clawing at its cheeks. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was a line of text. They live behind the drywall. I see them when I close my eyes. I stared at it for a long time, standing there in my pajamas, half asleep, half frozen. I thought it was some weird art thing at first. Maybe some abstract creative project Ethan was working on. But something about the intensity of the strokes, the pressure, the chaos in the lines, it just didn't feel right. The first confrontation. That evening, I knocked on Ethan's door. It took him a long time to answer. I could hear footsteps inside, but they were slow, like he was hesitating. When he finally opened the door, the hallway light spilled into his apartment, and I got my first look inside. It was off. The place was dim, even though it wasn't that late. His curtains were drawn, and the only light was this weak yellow glow from a desk lamp in the far corner. His walls were covered with paper. Not framed or organized. Just taped up everywhere, edge to edge. Scribbles, drawings, black ink chaos. He looked different, too. His hair was greasy and uncombed, and his eyes, man, they were sunken, ringed with deep purple. Wide and twitchy, like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey," I said, trying to keep it casual. "I think one of your drawings ended up under my door by mistake." He blinked at me for a long time. Just stared. Then he whispered, "It wasn't a mistake." There was this awkward silence. My stomach flipped a little. "I don't really want stuff like that," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can you just, keep it to your own place?" Ethan nodded slowly, too slowly. Then, right before closing the door, he leaned in and said, "They listen through the walls. Careful when you sleep." Then, click, he shut the door. The screams start. 3 nights later, I woke up to screaming. Not angry screaming. Not fighting. This was pure panic. Animalistic. Like someone being skinned alive. It came through the wall, Ethan's unit. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the drywall. I could hear him thrashing, screaming words I couldn't make out, sobbing, then suddenly laughing, this high-pitched, broken laugh that didn't sound human. I almost called 911 right then and there, but the noise stopped as suddenly as it started. Just silence. Dead silence. Not even his usual pacing. The next morning, there was another paper under my door. This one had a poem scrawled across it in red ink. In the hollow behind the plaster. They whisper through the night. I tried to seal the holes with tape. But still they bite and bite. I stared at it so long I missed my bus to work. My hands were shaking, and I realized I hadn't even eaten breakfast. Something in my body had shifted, this low, constant sense of dread was now a buzz under my skin. Like my instincts were telling me I was in danger. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. I think part of me knew this was just the beginning. So after the second note, the one with that messed up poem, I stopped trying to convince myself that this was just harmless weirdness. Something was seriously wrong with Ethan, and it was getting worse by the day. I didn't sleep for more than a few hours at a time. Every creak, every footstep in the hallway made my heart spike. I was jumpy, on edge, and no matter how loud I played music or podcasts at night, I couldn't drown out the unease that sat thick in the air, like fog in my chest that I should have minded my business. A few days later, I was walking back from work. It was one of those cold February evenings, where everything's gray and damp and the wind cuts through your jacket like needles. I got to my floor, turned the corner, and Ethan's door was wide open. Like, fully open. No sound coming from inside. No light. I slowed down. Something about it gave me that same feeling you get when you see roadkill that's still twitching, morbid, frozen curiosity mixed with horror. I looked around the hallway, empty, then stepped closer. I didn't go in, but I peeked from the doorway. And I swear to God, I'll never forget what I saw. His walls were covered in papers, hundreds of them, layered like scales, all overlapping, all scribbled with horrifying drawings. Some were just black ink scribbles, spirals that looked like they'd been drawn obsessively, over and over again. Others were faces, screaming ones, eyeless ones, ones with mouths full of jagged teeth. One wall was covered in what looked like hundreds of red eyes. Not drawn eyes, actual cutouts of red eyes from magazines, glued to the wall like a shrine. The air inside smelled awful. A mix of sweat, damp paper, and something else, something bitter and sour, like mold and metal. Then I saw Ethan. He was sitting on the floor in the far corner, knees pulled to his chest, rocking slightly. His face was turned toward the wall like he was trying to listen to it. His hand was covered in black ink, soaked into his fingers, smeared up to his wrist. There was a thick marker clutched in his fist, but he wasn't writing. Just rocking. "Ethan." I called, my voice cracking. He didn't move. Then, in the quiet, he whispered something. I couldn't make it out. I took a step closer, about to repeat myself. And then he snapped his head toward me. His face was pale, his eyes wild and unfocused, and his lips were trembling. "You let them in," he hissed. I stepped back so fast I nearly tripped over the doormat. Then he started crawling toward the door, not walking, not standing, crawling, like a horror movie creature. Fast and low to the ground. I bolted. Slammed my door shut behind me, locked it, and leaned against it, heart jackhammering in my chest. No more benefit of the doubt. No more excuses. This man was unwell. The third note was personal. The next morning, I found another note under my door. This one was written in pencil, long, jagged lines pressed into the paper so hard that parts of it were torn through. It wasn't a poem this time. It was a message. You laugh and breathe while I rot behind plaster. You close your eyes while I bleed through the paint. They whisper your name now. I warned you. You deserve this. My stomach dropped. That last line, "You deserve this," hit me like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just creepy anymore. It was targeted. He was angry. Delusional. And I was the fixation. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick and spent the morning sitting in my kitchen, blinds closed, clutching a coffee I never drank. I kept flinching at every sound, every footstep in the hall, every creak of the ceiling above. Around 2 p.m., I heard banging. Hard banging. From Ethan's apartment. Followed by a long, high-pitched scream. It didn't even sound human. It rose in pitch until it just cracked into silence. Then came the scratching. Like fingernails on wood. I pressed my ear to the shared wall and listened. It wasn't just scratching. It was writing. Scribbling. Fast and manic, like someone tearing a pen across every inch of the wall. I couldn't take it anymore. I tried to report it. I went down to the landlord's office. His name's Terry, older guy, usually grumpy but decent enough. I told him what was going on. The notes. The drawings. The screaming. He gave me this long, heavy sigh and rubbed his eyes. Clark. He's always been a bit strange. But you're not the first to say something lately. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. He's been tearing up the walls, Terry continued. Maintenance said there's paper glued behind his vents. Covered the inside of his fridge with writing. Tried to rip the smoke detector out of the ceiling. Said it was watching him. I asked him to do something, contact his emergency contact, call a wellness check, something. But he just muttered something about needing proper procedures and paperwork. I went back to my unit more shaken than before. That night, I put a chair under the door handle. The incident with the lights. It happened 3 nights later. I was just settling into bed, still fully clothed, with the hallway light on. I hadn't slept in the dark in weeks by that point, when all of a sudden, the power cut out. Just like that. Boom, total darkness. No lights. No hum from the fridge. No Wi-Fi. Just blackness and silence. I froze. My breath hitched. Then, from Ethan's side, I heard shuffling. Slow, dragging footsteps. Moving toward the wall. And then, ever so faintly, he started whispering my name. Jason. 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 Over and over. At first I thought I was imagining it, but no. I heard it. Clear as day. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip my phone. I called the police right then and there. I told them everything. The screaming. The drawings. The threats. The whispering. They said someone would be sent over soon. While I waited, I sat in my hallway with a flashlight gripped like a weapon, knees drawn up to my chest, staring at my door, half convinced he was going to break it down. And the whole time, he kept whispering my name. When the cops finally knocked on Ethan's door, it was a little past 1 a.m. I'd been sitting in the hallway outside my bedroom with the flashlight still in my hand, knees locked to my chest, every muscle in my body tense like a stretched wire. I heard the knock like a gunshot through the silence. Bang bang bang. Police. Mr. Clark. Open the door, sir. They knocked again, harder. No answer. I pressed my ear to the front door, barely breathing. The hallway outside was flooded with blue and red flashes. I could see them bleeding through the bottom of the door. Then came the sound that made my stomach turn. From inside Ethan's apartment, there was this sudden smack, like something heavy hitting the floor, followed by a low, guttural scream. Not fear. Not pain. Something else. Something unhinged. It sounded like pure madness, cracked open and left raw. The police didn't wait anymore. They forced the door open. I heard it slam against the wall. Wood splintered. One of the officers shouted, "Jesus Christ," and gagged. I heard footsteps rushing in, radio static, more shouting. I didn't know what to do. Curiosity overrode fear. I opened my door just a crack and peeked out. Ethan's apartment was lit up now, the flashing lights making everything look surreal, red, blue, like a horror movie on fast forward. I could see the inside clearly for the first time. It was worse than before. His couch had been torn open, stuffing everywhere. The floor was covered in piles of burned matches and pencil shavings. There were drawings taped to every surface, the fridge, the cabinets, even the ceiling. Some were soaked with something dark. Ink, I hoped. Blood, maybe. The worst part was the bathroom door. Someone, him, presumably, had written the word "whisper" over and over again on it. Hundreds of times. Layered like a swarm of insects. The officers were trying to get Ethan under control. He was thrashing, covered in ink and filth, trying to bite them. His arms were bleeding, covered in tiny cuts, like he'd been clawing at himself. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, darting around like he was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. He kept muttering things, fragments, phrases, one of them stuck with me. He walks behind the walls now. And then he looked straight at me. I didn't even think he could see me through the crack in my door. But he did. And he smiled. A wide, grotesque smile. Ink-stained teeth. Blood on his chin. That smile knocked the air out of my lungs. It felt personal. Like he knew I had called. Like I'd betrayed some sacred pact. After they dragged him out in restraints, screaming, laughing, then sobbing, the hallway slowly emptied. A few neighbors had peeked out too, whispering to each other. Terry showed up in a bathrobe, looking horrified and angry and confused all at once. Eventually, it went quiet. Too quiet. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again, those eyes, that smile. In the morning, the building reeked of disinfectant and cigarette smoke. The door to Ethan's apartment was sealed shut with a bright red notice. I went to work that day, barely able to function. I didn't tell anyone what happened. That night, around 11 p.m., I opened my door to grab a package Amazon had delivered late. There was something else on the floor. A sketchbook. Tattered. Dirty. Thick with pages. It had no name on it, but I knew it was his. My heart dropped. I didn't want to touch it, hell, I didn't even want to breathe near it. But my curiosity, my stupid curiosity, won again. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. The drawings inside were different from the others. These weren't just horror doodles or disturbing symbols. These were detailed, almost photographic sketches of me. Me sleeping. Me making coffee. Me walking down the hall. Always from strange angles, like through vents or cracks in the wall. Then, on one page, written in smeared red ink. I saw what you did. You let them follow me. That's when I dropped it and ran to the bathroom to throw up. That sketchbook broke me. I couldn't stay in that apartment another night. I crashed at a friend's place across town, told him some vague story about a disturbance in my building. He gave me the guest room, no questions asked. But the damage was already done. I started hearing things even when I wasn't home. The whispering. The scratching. Even in my friend's place. One night, I swear I heard the damn ink pen scribbling from the other side of the wall. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But deep down, I knew. Ethan might have been crazy, yeah. But part of me was starting to wonder if maybe he wasn't completely wrong. Maybe something really did crawl behind the walls of our apartment building. Maybe I heard it too. Maybe it followed him. Or maybe, he passed it to me that I stayed at my friend Nate's place for almost a week. He never pressed me for the full story. Nate was one of those people who could tell when not to ask. Maybe he saw the way I flinched at small noises or how I checked the corners of the room too often. I slept in his guest room with the lights on, a chair wedged under the doorknob. I didn't tell him about the sketchbook. Because here's the thing. I didn't throw it out. It's like I couldn't. I left it in my backpack. Tucked deep in the back. Every time I tried to toss it in the trash or burn it, I got this sick, tight feeling in my chest, like my body was telling me don't. I know how that sounds, but you weren't there. You didn't feel the weight of that thing. It was like the pages watched me. I kept seeing Ethan's face when they took him away. That twisted grin. His eyes didn't look human anymore. A week later, I got a text from Terry, our building manager. Hey Jason. Just letting you know they cleared Ethan's place. Some cleaning team came by. Police gave the all clear. Doors sealed but safe to move back in if you want. Safe. What a damn joke. But I couldn't keep hiding. I had rent to pay. My stuff was still in there. I owed it to myself to at least go back and try. Besides, part of me thought maybe I'd imagined it all, maybe stress had twisted everything up. So I packed my stuff, left Nate's, and went back to that apartment. The hallway felt dead. Like someone had drained all the color out of it. No sounds. No music, no pipes, no footsteps. Even the carpet felt colder. When I stepped into my place, everything looked exactly the same, but wrong. I could smell faint disinfectant and something else underneath, something sour, like old ink. I dropped my bags, stood in the middle of the room, and listened. Nothing. Until around 2:30 a.m. It started in the bathroom. A soft tapping. Not like plumbing, more like knuckles on tile. Repeated. Measured. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept by the door and crept toward the sound. I opened the bathroom door. Nothing. Empty. Light flickered once, then held. But as I stepped in, the mirror fogged up in front of me. I hadn't showered. The air wasn't warm. And still, right there, I watched the condensation bloom on the glass in a breath-like oval, and then a single word appeared. Listen. I backed out of that bathroom so fast I nearly fell over the rug. But the worst was still to come. At 4:11 a.m., I woke up on the couch to the sound of someone whispering my name. Not a dream. Not a half-sleep hallucination. Jason. It came from behind the vent in the hallway. Then silence. Then scratching. I lost it. I opened that vent with a screwdriver and shined my flashlight inside. Nothing but dust, old wiring, a dead roach or two. I tried to sleep again. Didn't happen. The last drawing. 2 days later, I finally took the sketchbook back out. I don't know why I did it. Morbid curiosity. Madness. I sat on the floor in front of my door, flipped to the back pages. There was a new drawing. It hadn't been there before. I swear to God. It was of me, sitting in this exact position. Right down to the pajamas I was wearing. In the drawing, I'm holding the sketchbook, eyes wide, and behind me was something tall and thin, standing in the corner of the room. It had no face. Just this long, gaping mouth, stretching down where the chin should have been, like it was melting. The thing's hands were hovering just inches from my shoulders. There was a final note written in the bottom corner of the page in tiny, cramped letters. He drew until he saw him too. That's when I realized something that damn near broke my mind. Ethan didn't create the drawings. He was recording what he saw. Like a witness. A sketch artist for something that no one else believed was real. And now I'd picked up where he left off. The walls weren't empty. I started noticing tiny holes along the edges of my apartment, behind the fridge, under the kitchen sink, in the walls near the bedroom vent. Like someone had drilled them to watch. Some had burnt edges. I called Terry and asked him if maintenance had ever checked behind the drywall in our wing. He sounded confused, then annoyed. Said, "No one's touched those units since the place was built in the 90s, Jason. If you've got pests, file a report." Pests. Sure. That night, I woke up to the loudest scream I've ever heard. Not from my apartment. From Ethan's. It was sealed. Still condemned. No one should have been inside. And yet, that scream shook the air. It was wet, broken, like a dying animal trying to speak. It lasted almost 8 seconds, then cut out completely. The lights in my unit dimmed for a second and buzzed back. I didn't sleep again. That I should have left. I should have packed up everything and gotten out. The apartment. The building. Hell, the city. But I didn't. I couldn't. After that scream, after all the signs, I was no longer just scared. I was obsessed. I spent days digging around my apartment, pulling back floorboards, tearing open walls, anything to find where the sound was coming from. Where the whispers started. Where that thing Ethan had seen, was hiding. There had to be an answer. A reason why everything felt so wrong. Then, I found it. It wasn't even a room, really. More like a crawl space behind the walls. I'd knocked through part of the drywall near the old utility closet, hoping for a mouse nest. But when my fingers hit something soft and thin, it sent a shiver through me. At first, I thought it was some kind of old fabric. But then I pulled it back, and what I saw underneath made my stomach turn. There was a narrow passage behind the walls. I'd never noticed it before, but I could see the rough edges of a small door, concealed behind drywall. It was dark, but I could tell it led somewhere. To something. I grabbed a flashlight, crawled through the opening, and squeezed through to the other side. What I found wasn't just a hidden space. It was a chamber. The chamber was small, barely big enough for me to stand in. But the walls. They were covered in drawings. Thousands of them. But not like the sketches in Ethan's apartment. These were different. These were older. The lines were faded but unmistakably deliberate, drawn by someone who had lived in this space for a long time. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling, they were covered in thousands of intricate, overlapping images. Some of them were of faces, contorted, broken, wrong. Others were of shapes, symbols, and places I'd never seen before. Then I saw it. In the center of the floor, carved deep into the wood, was a symbol. A twisted, jagged shape, like a maze with no exit. I recognized it immediately. It was the same symbol Ethan had drawn over and over again in the sketchbook. At the bottom of the symbol was a line of text, scrawled in black ink. He will never leave. He was always here. It didn't make sense. But there was something else, something darker. I heard a faint sound, a creaking, like something shifting in the walls. The final encounter. That's when it happened. The air changed. The temperature dropped. My flashlight flickered out, plunging me into total darkness. I could feel it then, something was in the room with me. I couldn't see it, but I could sense it. A presence. Cold. Watching. Waiting. Then, I heard it. A whisper. Jason. It came from behind me, but I couldn't move. My legs locked up, my body frozen. I had never been so terrified in my life. I turned around, and there he was. Not Ethan. But something else. A man, or what had been a man. His eyes were empty, black as night, and his skin was stretched thin, pulled tight over his bones. He wore the same twisted grin Ethan had worn before he was taken away. He stepped closer, and the smell hit me, something rotten, something alive and decaying. His fingers twitched, stretching unnaturally long, as though they were reaching out for me. He opened his mouth, and I saw it. The hole. It stretched and stretched, wider than any human mouth should have been. It seemed to ripple, like it was alive. And from that hole came a voice. Not words, just a sound. An unearthly hum, as if the air itself was vibrating with something ancient and wrong. You are one of us now. And then he was gone. I don't remember how I got out of there. All I know is that I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would burst. The walls around me were silent. But the air was thick with something. I knew he was still there. The end of the line. It's been a few weeks since all that happened. I haven't been able to sleep since. The worst part is that every time I close my eyes, I see Ethan's face. But it's not the face I saw when he was dragged away. No. It's that same twisted grin, that same black-eyed stare. He wasn't crazy. Ethan was right. And now, I'm seeing it too. It's in my walls. It's in the air. I've called the police twice. I've even tried to leave, but I can't. I feel it, watching. I hear the scratching behind the walls, just like he did. The whispers never stop. I don't know if I'll ever escape. Maybe I'm already part of it now. The end.